Welcome to the Igniting Change podcast, brought to you by 3StatIQ. This summer, we're releasing a special series of Igniting Change by revisiting some of our most unforgettable episodes. Our fearless co-hosts, Duncan, Sophie, and Puff, will be delving into our archives to hear the journeys of the inspiring individuals harnessing technology to drive incredible social change. So, whether you're a longtime listener or new to our mission, we hope these episodes inspire you to join us in using tech for a force for good. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this special remix of the Igniting Change podcast.
I'm excited to be here. My name is Brittany Dernberger, and I am a public speaker, a professor, a researcher, an evaluator, and I get really excited about using data and storytelling to create social change. And I currently work at CARE, which is a large international NGO. And we focus on international development and humanitarian work to eradicate poverty and achieve social justice with a specific focus on women and girls. And I've been at CARE for a little more than 2 years, and I lead our systems level impact initiative.
So my first question to you is, why do you think it's important for more women to join the tech industry, and how do you see them shaping the future?
So I have to confess, my image of the tech industry comes from like pop culture, Silicon Valley bros who, it's just like this very like white men in their 20s who are like sitting on beanbag chairs like that. That's my image of the tech industry. So that's I guess worth interrogating why that's our image. We know that it's dominated by men. Sociologists talk about this concept of gender occupational segregation or occupational segregation by gender, which is like, especially in American and Western contexts, people tend to end up in certain occupations and certain disciplines divided by gender. And that has a lot of implications for pay inequality, for status and prestige. Like typically, the types of careers women end up in are more likely to be considered lower status, lower paid, and occupations that men end up in are typically better compensated and considered higher status. So I think when we think about STEM fields and technology and other scientific fields, like it can't just be a certain group of people, whether that's gender or race or other identity categories. We benefit so much from having women and people of color, people from low income backgrounds in all industries, but I think especially industries like technology that are so prolific, right? Like we all use technology in different ways in our daily lives. And if those are only being built and designed by a certain group of people, that just limits, I think, their utility for others. And so I would say it's important on a bunch of different levels for women to join the tech industry. And I think in terms of shaping the future, women and other voices that have been historically marginalized can help us identify tools and different applications for technology that if you only have one group of people in the room, we're just going to miss because, we can't all know everything. And so getting those diverse perspectives, whether it's artificial intelligence or data collection tools or social media apps, like we need a wider array of voices in those rooms. That is, not only am I on Zoom or Teams, all day, every day, working with people around the world, but many of the participants in the countries where CARE is working do not have a smartphone, do not have regular access to technology in the way that those of us in a Western context often do. And I think that's a really important piece of this conversation. So not only who is in the tech industry designing for tech, but who has access to this technology. And there's a whole body of work around the global gender digital divide, where if you look at all of the people around the world who don't have access to the internet, for example, on a regular basis, like a disproportionate share of those people are women. And so what does that mean in terms of access to information, access to livelihoods and making a living?
What advice would you have, Brittany, for young women aspiring to pursue a career in technology? Are there any specific skills or qualities that you think that they should focus on developing?
Oh, yes. So my career, we've already talked about it, has like existed in a lot of different places. But I would say, in addition to substantively focusing on gender and social inequality, I've technically really found a place in research and evaluation. And there are two things I would say for people interested in technology and kind of thinking about using technology in research and evaluation ways. One is to get experience. And that could be through things like internships and like entry-level jobs, but also things like a class project or a volunteer opportunity. I think we again think about a very American context, but we put a lot of emphasis on like, what is your degree? Maybe you need to major in computer science or engineering, or I think again we have a very specific idea of what like the pipeline to the tech industry looks like. But it's not always about the degree. Like I majored in women and gender studies and sociology for my undergrad, and then got a master's in public administration, thinking about nonprofit leadership, and then took this little bit of a pivot to a PhD in sociology. And along the way, I was working in different jobs and doing consulting and getting these experiences. And I have worked with a lot of young people and some of my own research on this topic. When people are finishing their education and looking for a job, if they're not successful, often the first impulse is like, well, I better get another degree, or maybe I should like get this online certificate, or we revert back to this, and then you just have another degree or another certificate and still like not the experience. So that would be one big piece of advice, is like anything you can do to just like get your hands messy is super useful. And equally important is finding out what you don't like. Like I often tell this to undergrad students I work with, like if you have an internship and you're like, whew, this is not for me, that's super valuable information, because now you can think about, okay, I don't like that industry, or that particular work environment was not the best fit for me. That is such important information. All internships should be paid. I will die on that hill. So I'd say don't take an unpaid internship. But to the extent that you can find opportunities to work on hands-on projects, is really useful for your own learning and development, but also showing future employers that you have some of these skills. And then the second I would say is to just be curious and follow your curiosities. I think some of the best jobs I've had in my career are jobs that if you had asked me like 2 years prior, I didn't even know existed. And so, to be honest, I had not heard of CARE, which is this huge, massive NGO. I had not heard of CARE when I applied, because I didn't come from the international development space. And I remember my first conversation with a recruiter, she was like, tell me about, your experience and familiarity with CARE. And I was honest, just said, yeah, I had never heard of it, but it was this job that focused on like gender inequality and social change and systems change, which is what I do. So it seemed really interesting, and I applied. And she was horrified, right? Because like CARE has existed for 75 years and has this massive footprint. So I just say that to say that if you're just kind of paying attention to what piques your interest and following what seems intriguing to you, I think that you'll find things hopefully that feel fulfilling along the way.
In what ways do you see technology being used to address societal challenges? And how can women in tech contribute to, I guess, positive social impact through their work?
Yes, I think we're in this moment where global inequality has never been worse. Whether it's conflict, climate change, still kind of recovering from the pandemic and thinking about what the next health-related crisis might be. Like there are just so many massive social problems that as a global community need to be addressed. I get really excited at thinking about this intersection of technology and social impact. I am not on the design phase we already talked about what some of those apps could look like. But as a sociologist and thinking about structures and systems, I get really interested in like, how do we apply some of what's happening in international development spaces around locally led work, including places in the global south that historically have been left out of some of these conversations, and bridging those leaders, those community activists who are already doing this work in their own context with these technology companies or people who are developing, thinking about technology, because I think there's like so much work that could happen there, and it probably should not be, Silicon Valley or wherever our tech centers are in North America, like dreaming up what might be useful to someone in a different place in the world with no contextual information, right? So like how do we make those conversations and resource sharing, capacity sharing happen? I don't know what that looks like, but I just think there's like gotta be some work to do there. I know CARE, as an example of this, has a project with CARE Nepal, so our Nepal country team, that developed this game called Go Nisha Go. You can look it up, but it's basically a digital game that you like download as an app on your phone that's designed to like positively shift gender social norms. So, and it's designed for like teenagers. So you like download this app and it kind of is, it's like a role-playing game and asks you this like series of questions, and like Nisha makes different choices, and it deals with topics like contraception and like becoming sexually active. And these are pretty taboo topics, especially in certain places. And so it's a safe way to help young people think about some of these topics, and like as Nisha makes different choices in this game, they get to see like the consequences of those choices. And the team that's working on this, along with some partners, has like published research on what they're seeing with this. I'm happy to share it with folks who are interested. But like there's things like that where I'm just like, this is so cool and so amazing, and there's gotta be more of like whatever that is that we could do globally. And to get back to our earlier point, we need women, we need people who've been historically excluded from these conversations to be part of those design processes.
The first question I have for you today, Nicole, is why do you think it's important for more women to join the tech industry, and how do you see them shaping the future?
Thanks, Puff. It's a very compelling question. I mean, it's absolutely important for women, for people of color, for trans folks, non-binary folks, to be encouraged to engage in tech. It has been a patriarchal industry for a long time and have been underrepresented consistently. What we've seen in having folks in leadership roles and guiding the stories of our products, we have greater diversity and better products that are serving users in the way that they need to be served. So really, ultimately, anyone who is impacted by the tech industry and emerging technology, which is everybody, should be representative in technology and among those who are doing the research, who are looking at the data, who are making and shaping products and implementing these technologies.
What advice do you have for young women aspiring to pursue a career in technology? So, like, are there any specific skills or qualities they should focus on developing?
It's a great question. I think because of the complexities and how it's so much part of our lives, there's no one specific answer. But from my perspective, there's sort of two skills that I would bring to this space. One, being curiosity, sort of getting at this interest in the world and tackling questions and being curious. And I think the other piece is resilience, which we see in the world that I live in a lot, serving not only the technology side, but the work and making change in the world. Because when you're building products, as you know, failure and iteration becomes essential to making good work, right? And feeling good about trying something, it not working, and trying again. And having the skill in your own self to think about the world like that, to ask those good questions and be curious, and to explore something and maybe get there and maybe not, and picking yourself back up and going back into another question. So those would be the two skills that I would lift. I did not have a linear trajectory here, but I would say that STEM programs in general serve that curiosity and serve that resilience, right? I am a researcher by training and a total science nerd, and really feel that STEM programs are the best way to equip all young people for their current and future landscape of tech as that continues to evolve, because you will keep learning new science, better diving into those technologies. And it can benefit even folks who don't end up going into tech. It doesn't need to be a career in tech, as we were just talking about. Everyone is immersed in technology every single day, and having an understanding of them in particular will serve you in your life to make choices and think about how you want to use technology in your own life, especially as it continues to rapidly evolve, right? We need to think about what feels good for ourselves, because it affects us all, whether we work in the tech industry or not. It is so increasingly important, especially for young folks, to be equipped with an understanding of it and to make their own choices. At least my career in technology was not linear at all. And understanding that, that's okay, right? It's sort of coming to this resilience, and opportunities will arise as these technologies become more and more of our lives across whatever your skills in, and to not be afraid of tech. And I think that was a real challenge for me. I have a degree in public health. I am a sex educator by training. I spent an enormous amount of time working around sexual health in very specific health promotion and research ways. And I really understand how to write a research question and analyze it and think about these issues, but I hadn't looked at tech as its own arena until I fell into a job in it. It was sort of this marriage of technology and sexual health that brought me along. But you can learn a new vocabulary. And I think it is more than that, but not being afraid to step into something that's new.
Final question, Nicole. So, in what ways do you see technology being used to address societal challenges? And how can women in tech, I guess, contribute to positive social impact through their work?
Well, Puff, this one's hard for me because this is my bread and butter, right? This is what Planned Parenthood's tech teams do, and have the great luck of being on an incredible team for our digital products folks and working with incredible people across the national office. I'm so grateful for the diversity there and their passion and curiosity and resilience, tackling great societal change and challenges. And I have a few examples of products that I think I want to lift today, if that sounds okay.
Absolutely. Come on, share away.
Thank you. It just, technology has created unparalleled opportunities to reach people faster, more personalized ways, more efficiently. And Planned Parenthood takes that very seriously. We want to create products that meet people where they are when they need us and expand access to sexual and reproductive health care and information. Education is essential to our work as well as care. And we're committed to using innovation to empower our patients, to empower our users with the information they need and the expert health care that they need, even in the face of hostile legislative climates. And I'll talk about that a little bit more, but we really continue to look for innovative ways to use tech to get people to what they need, no matter where they are, no matter who they are. And that really becomes the heart of this work. And we, continue to analyze what's happening across the space in healthcare and tech to make sure we are using our digital tools to meet user needs as they evolve. And the first example that I want to lift is probably the most obvious in some ways, but like many healthcare organizations, in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, we doubled down on telehealth and telemedicine and making sure that we were getting people to the care they needed, whether they were leaving their house or not. And our Planned Parenthood Direct app served a really unique role in that moment. Now, Planned Parenthood Direct serves birth control, or hormonal birth control, one form of emergency contraception, and UTI treatment. And those are the 3 services that we provide via the app at this point. And you don't need to go to a health center at all, right? So there's a unique opportunity in the moment where no one was going much of anywhere to reach people and expanding access to reproductive health care. I think one of the things that we are exploring and continue to learn more about in the wake of growing restrictions and bans on sexual and reproductive health care, this app is going to probably serve a new role and continue to serve as a channel to reach people directly in their homes in a way that we weren't thinking about pre-pandemic. And we know that folks struggle to get to the healthcare in person, whether that's from transportation or cost or having a child hanging off of you. The reality for many people, and understanding that we want to meet people in the home if they want to be there, right? Again, for this diversity of applications and tools representing the diversity of people that we serve and the people who are making it. I think another example that is near and dear to my heart, they're chat products. So I came to Planned Parenthood to lead our chat text, which is our live chat program, where we have educators across the country answering people's questions in real time via text and instant message around their sexual health. About 3 years into my tenure, we took the learnings from that and designed a sex ed chatbot named Rue, which is AI powered and is the first of a kind tool. And it delivers personalized health information to people, specifically young people on demand. We will talk to anybody 24/7, but the bot was initially designed for our youngest users, and we continue to see young people predominantly using it. Slightly older than we anticipated, which we could talk about another time.
I'm really fascinated by that, because how much older than you were anticipating?
Well, initially the bot was designed for 13 to 17-year-olds, and we wanted to focus on normalizing bodies, essentially. So whether it was getting your period for the first time, masturbation, puberty, and bots are really good at reassurance. So it was just, the message was, you are normal, everything is okay. And what we found, like everything else Planned Parenthood, users wanted to see a wider range of things from us. And that included information about pregnancy and STIs and emergency contraception and birth control and abortion and the full gamut. And also representatively of our wider patient population, most of the folks who have been talking to us are within this age range of 18 to 29-year-olds who are sexually active and are often engaged in these questions more than others.
You have a really good grounded approach to using technology, and you're not afraid to experiment and try new things. And I think that might lead us on to the next question, which I have for you, which is, can you talk to us about an example of tech for good that you're using in Relate at the moment, or maybe you're about to use? Do you have one example that you can share with us today?
Yeah, I absolutely do. So one of the things that we're working on at the moment that I'm really excited by is a project that's being very generously funded by the Department for Work and Pensions here in the UK, and it's a campaign where we're looking to sort of improve the ways that parents who are going through a separation or divorce can relate to one another, interact with each other, and co-parent. And we're actually using like a lot of organizations at the moment using AI to sort of look at this. And it's one of those, it's an area that's moving so fast, that when we put this pitch forward, it felt like what we were suggesting was completely novel and not in use anywhere. And now that we're sort of 6 months later, I think it's becoming not commonplace by any means, but it's less of an out there idea. So what we're looking at the moment, one of the things that we found is that, and this is across the board at Relate, not necessarily just when we're thinking about what we call reducing parental conflict, which is basically helping parents who aren't together anymore actually get along and focus on raising their kid. One of the things that we've really noticed is that the times when people most need support, times when we're not available. So, we're not a crisis response service, so we don't have phone lines that are operating 24 hours a day. But when we see real spikes in, people booking relationship counselling or people looking on our website, is sort of between the hours of 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. Which feels quite, strange. But actually, when I think about the times when my relationships haven't been working very well, that's exactly the point when you've had this big fight, you've finally someone stormed out or gone to bed and slammed the door or done something along those lines, and you can't fall asleep because you're so stressed about this horrible argument that you've just had, and you turn to Google to try and resolve that. And because we're not a crisis response service, we're not going to be having telephones sort of manned and womaned or personed, 24 hours a day. We wanted to think about how it was that we could provide accessible and useful support at those times. And where we've sort of landed in our most recent part is creating a chatbot that is available to parents who are sort of struggling, that they can talk to, that is trained entirely on our years and years worth of guidance, advice, articles, service specifications, the syllabus and information that our counsellors themselves are trained on when they go through our training courses, that will allow people to be able to access the advice that will hopefully sort of be useful to them to get them through those particular moments until it is that they can find time to make a follow-up plan. And at its most basic level, that's what this project is about. But we've also got a few other things that it does that we think are going to be useful. So one of those is it's a writing editor, and this is all being made currently. It's none of this is operational right now, unfortunately, but will be soon. One of them is a writing editor. So let's say you've separated from your partner and it's their turn to have the kid this weekend, and they've just messaged you and said that someone's come up at work and they can't take your kids, and this is the 6th time that's happened, and you're I'm trying to watch my language during this this podcast, but you're really annoyed about that, and you want to write a message that expresses that you're really annoyed, but you want to do it in a way that is not going to escalate things and make things worse. So you can draft your message in this sort of tool, and it will give you advice and point out where how you've said this might make someone feel attacked. Can we suggest you say it in this way instead? To sort of give people pause and think about how they might say things differently. Another sort of function of that editor is it's you can ask it to act as your child. So you can give it some information. My child is 7 years old and neurodivergent, and generally quite worried. I want to explain to them that we're separating, and you can practice on that with giving that sort of bot those parameters that it will come back and sort of tell you, what the child might be thinking, feeling, what questions that they might have, so you can have a go at having those conversations a few times in a safe space. The organisation was surprisingly really, really on board. I was brought in a digital transformation role originally to Relate, and I've moved into my role now. And Relate has always been, aware that then sort of behind the times when it comes to adopting digital. They were sort of, all of their services were delivered face to face before COVID, and then all of their services were delivered virtually during and post COVID. They had to make a really quick change. But they're also incredibly curious, just a really curious collection of people who are very motivated by the cause, which is how can we support as many people with their relationships as possible. But also, the safety of our clients is really the most important thing. And, when you think about relationship support, that ranges from everything from like a group of people living in a share house who just can't figure out whose turn it is to wash the dishes to, some of the more serious things that you might come across, which is where there is a serious crime or, a murder committed because of violence within a relationship. And we don't work with, we're not a crisis response center. We tend to, generally speaking, if there's abuse in a relationship, then it's except in very specific circumstances, we'll refer to specialist services. But it means that we have to be really careful to make sure that the people who are coming to access our services are people who we're in the best place to actually support and help. And that was one of the things that was really important to the team, was what's the safeguarding look like with using a tool like this? Because the last thing you want is someone to be saying, I'm scared of what my partner's going to do to me when it gets home, and have that bot sort of say, well, have you considered talking to them about your feelings using I not you statements? Because, that's not going to happen if someone is scared. And one of the really ingenious ways that we've dealt with this, we're working with an agency called IE Digital on building this, and I really rate them. They're really great. But one of the things that they have developed is a secondary bot that interacts with our public-facing one that operates completely behind the scenes, which takes every message that's sent to it and then does a evaluation on what the percentage likelihood that someone is at risk of harm based on the message that they've received. And then we're able to put in sort of trigger points that react at, 25%, 50%, 75%, that trigger different safeguarding policies or responses. So, if someone says, I'm worried about how my partner might react, that might trigger a sort of a soft response, and goes, it might say, oh, well, what makes you worry? And they say, well, something like this hasn't happened before. That will de-escalate the response. But if they say the last time they punched a hole in the wall, that will greatly sort of escalate, and we can make sure that we've got sort of nuanced response based on the inputs in that regard. And making sure that we're sort of, if someone's coming in and it looks like they're at immediate risk, then that can be flagged to the people that it needs to be flagged to, and they can be told to get in touch with people who can provide them with support in that time.
Are there any other examples that you would want to shine a light on today that perhaps maybe inspire you or have caught your eye?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a couple of examples for this. My sort of go-to one that's always my favorite one is one that was done by a Spanish organization that was done around displaying messages to children who might be victims of abuse. So they brought up all of this billboards advertising. The organization's called Aid to Children and Adolescents. They brought up all this billboard advertising, and if you were over 4'5", you would just see a normal sort of advertisement. But if you were a child who was under 4'5" and was looking up at the billboard from that angle, you would see a message about how to access support if you were being abused or someone was hurting you. It was using a sort of lenticular lens, it's called, but this sort of technology that, if you look at something from one direction, you see one thing, and another one you see that, to make sure that children were able to know what to do if they were sort of in trouble in that regard, which I just thought was so clever. And I sort of love things like this that exist in the public space and public realm as well. So I thought that was great. Another one that I've been really inspired by recently is RNIB's Sonic logo that they've introduced as a sort of accessibility tool. So this idea that it's the Royal National Institute of Blind People, to avoid using sort of acronyms. But obviously their key audience is sight impaired and sort of visually impaired. So they've worked on creating a logo that is sonic, that is sound, so that their audiences can hear a representation of who they are as an organization, and have a series of sort of like brand sounds as well as brand images and brand colors and different things like that to really make their brand sing in this creative way, in the same way a visual logo would for people who could see and engage with things in that way, which I think is just incredibly audience driven, and just a really lovely way of creating connection and just sort of thinking outside of the the campaigns that I love the most are those that sort of think about why is this thing important and go back to the real beginning of that why. And this one is just like it's really important for our audience to connect with us and to associate us with things, so when they see something out in the wild they know it's us, and they've thought well, if we can't do that with visuals, what else can we do it with? And leading into sound in that way, I just think is a really lovely approach.